when a husband doesn't listen to his wife. That's the subject of our broadcast today. And as a Christian counselor, I've received numerous calls from couples for marriage counseling over the years. And if the wife initiates the call, often she will explain that she and her husband are experiencing communication difficulties. It's kind of classic. It really doesn't matter what their situation really is. It's just the easiest thing, I think, to initially suggest that we're having communication issues. And for that matter, who doesn't? And then once I meet with both in my office, it becomes apparent that, in fact, they are communicating, but they're not listening. They don't have good listening skills, and so there's definitely need for improvement in that regard. So in today's broadcast, we are going to consider several consequences when a husband doesn't listen to his wife. We'll do future broadcasts, men, as far as why wives contribute to the difficulty of communication. But for today, this is about us, men. And if you haven't already watched my previous video entitled, "Are You a Good Listener?" please go back and look at that one, because I highly recommend you do so because it lays a foundation for good listening in that particular presentation. So as I mentioned, having done couples therapy now for over 20 years, in fact, 20 years just at the current ministry that I'm in, much longer prior to coming to this ministry, there are case studies after case studies that I could share. And so the following is simply a familiar example. A husband comes home from a long day of work. He walks in the door, and his wife greets him and starts talking about her day. You know, about the frustrations that she's experiencing with her boss, her lunch with a friend, and maybe the challenges with a child are some of the first things that she begins to share. And somewhere in the midst of her words, you men, us as husbands, we begin to slowly tune out. Maybe we look down at our phone, or maybe we've got the remote and we're beginning to click through channels, and our mind begins to wander to other things. Now, you might not think that she's really not noticing that you're being distracted, but I can guarantee you that she does. And by not keeping eye contact and engaging with her, she begins to sense that what she's saying really doesn't matter to you, that you don't really care, and that something else is more important than her. Maybe not even what she's sharing, but she's sensing that something else is more important than what she has to say. Now, this may lead to a back and forth conversation that oftentimes can become heated. You know, she might suggest, "You're not listening to me." And he might suggest, "I heard every word you said." And then you might end up in a fight. Well, men, when we don't give our undivided attention to our wives, we shouldn't be surprised if some of the following things occur. So we're going to talk about just a few. This is not an exhaustive list by any means. Our wives may become distant. You see, men, when our lady shares something, she's sharing her heart. And it's a moment of vulnerability and potential intimacy where she is sharing her thoughts and her feelings with you. And frankly, she doesn't want to share those kinds of thoughts and feelings with just anybody. And so she's bearing her heart with you. And if it's important to her, it should be important to you. Well, therein lies the problem. So when we as men don't give our full attention, she begins to feel rejected. She might even begin to feel hurt. And she may begin to withdraw, pulling back, kind of guarding herself. What's she guarding herself from? Well, she's not wanting to be feeling like you're rejecting her more. And you say, well, I wasn't intending to reject her. Well, you weren't being attentive. And it's at this point, if you notice that she's no longer engaging, it would be wise on your part to ask, is everything okay? Are you all right? Now, don't be surprised at this point if she says, yeah, I'm fine, and just pretends to be okay. She really isn't. She's probably already shut down and kind of withdrawn her heart due to your inattentiveness. And so, men, we must guard against this kind of distancing where our wives begin to withdraw because of our lack of genuinely being interested in what they have to say. And so if this begins to happen, we need to stop what we're doing and we need to let her know that there's nothing more important to us than her feelings and what's happening in your life, in her life, I should say. And you say, well, I'm not sure that that's a truthful statement. Well, it needs to be true. You need to allow the Lord to make that real in you, even if you don't feel that way. And because she's going to know that you don't feel that way, and that's part of the problem. So if you've blown it, or if you find yourself in a moment where you have blown it, be quick to ask for forgiveness. Say, you know what, honey, I wasn't listening. You're right. Would you forgive me? And lovingly draw near to her emotionally, reestablishing eye contact and intentionally listening is imperative. Now again, depending on the situation, don't try to overdo it or try to become touchy-feely. You have to be sensitive to what she's kind of presenting at that moment because you've already done some damage. So be genuine in your expression and in your words. Remember, men, our ability to love our wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it is Christ himself. You know, we can't muster this up on our own, can we? Nor should we try. But we can certainly participate with Christ and begin to learn to engage our wives genuinely and lovingly, allowing him to teach us to listen and to love our wives. A natural consequence, kind of what typically happens next if we're not listening to our wives, and this is kind of a repeated habit, they may begin to become indifferent. And this is not necessarily justified. We're not justifying their response. It's a fleshly response often on their part. But we're simply acknowledging how wives tend to handle the lack of attention from their husbands. I mean, you know, after a period of time, if we're just not engaged and if we're not just there for them, if we're not interested and they begin to pick up on that, don't be surprised if they become somewhat indifferent. And when your wife constantly feels like she isn't being heard, she will begin to stop expecting anything at all from you. Now, this can become a very dangerous development in your marriage relationship. And oftentimes it occurs and husbands don't even realize it's happening. That's even worse, because I can guarantee your wife does. Women express themselves with the full array of their God-given emotional expression. And I can hear some of you men saying, yeah, I know, that's what kind of overwhelms me. Well, you need to begin to appreciate them for who they are. If they begin to withdraw because of your lack of attentiveness, and it begins to lead to indifference on their part, it can turn into and develop into an emotional detachment. That's not healthy for a relationship. We always want to live in such a way to give our wife every reason to love us, to want to be with us, to want to be in a relationship with us. And one of the best things that we can do as men to communicate that is to be understanding. And yes, to be understanding to the full array of their emotional expressions. And not to minimize that or to downplay that or to wish that they didn't have so much expression. They are the beautiful expressions of who they are, and we need to begin to appreciate that, accepting them for who they are, without trying to change them any more than they shouldn't be trying to change you. You see, in this way, our wives will not lose their first love for us as a genuine desire to be in relationship with us. Now, again, I will acknowledge that if we've lost our first love with the Lord, if we're not really taking His lead and being dependent on Him, then it's not surprising that we can lose our first love for somebody else. But we're talking about some of the consequences of not listening to our wives. And this is kind of a telltale sign. At some point, they begin to really lose their interest, their first love, their passion. You see, this indifference that we've been talking about can and will dampen her passion for you and extinguish the flames of love. And when this occurs, she will lose her desire to listen to you as well. And nothing probably aggravates you more than the fact that you don't feel like she respects you. She's not listening to you either. Well, and again, I'm not justifying a flesh for flesh mentality. I'm just explaining the dynamics of it. No, she no longer is respecting you or taking your lead. She begins to challenge you more. So there is a direct correlation between indifference and a lack of interest to be intimate in the bedroom. That's right, men. Sexual intimacy is often one of the first things that's affected because we haven't listened to our wives way back when we first got home. They say that lovemaking starts in the kitchen well before the evening and the covers are pulled over. A final consequence of husbands not listening to their wives, but certainly not the final word on the subject, is that she may become focused on other things, even on other relationships. Yes, that potentially could be another man. Not that she intentionally pursues another man, but she simply may find another man that is all too eager to hear her out. The very thing that you and I as husbands have neglected. And so, once again, I'm not justifying this kind of fleshly response. However, our ladies will be tempted to get their needs elsewhere. And unfortunately, there are far too many other men lurking in the shadows to give them all the emotional listening they desires. Because don't forget, these rascals, these scoundrels, also want to fulfill their needs, which is a lustful desire to take advantage of your vulnerable wife. Now, this might also mean that she shares her heart with her girlfriends instead of you. So now she's kind of wanting to do things away from the home and not spend as much time from you, and you begin to complain about it. Well, there's a reason for that. Or she might begin spending all of her time being occupied with the children's interests, and you begin to feel sidelined and neglected. These are simply some of the telltale signs of not effectively listening to our wives. The best way, men, for us to enjoy and safeguard our relationships is to heed the words of the Apostle Paul. And frankly, this goes for both of us, husbands and wives. We found his words in Philippians chapter 2 and verse 4, where he says, "Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others." So, as you begin to be aware of what the Lord is speaking to you and take his lead in the relationships that you have, and in particular that marriage relationship, begin to allow God to cultivate marriage as God intended. Till next time, please subscribe if you haven't already done so. Give us a thumbs up. The more interaction we have regarding these videos, the more YouTube possibly shares it. And give me your comments below. I'd love to respond to you, answer any questions that you may have. We hope you were encouraged and blessed by this video. We would love to have your feedback and interact with you. If you have a testimony that relates to today's discussion, please share it below in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so that each time we upload a video that you'll be notified. Be sure to check out our blog on our website, which is in the description below. And until next time, may you experience life as God intended.